So I had this really great foundation of accounting, but I actually did not like accounting and client work at all. So I left that field and then I started a business, and I didn't actually like that business that much either. So I sold it, and that was kind of the turning point for me. The day I sold it, I just had that a little bit of a light bulb moment. The guy that bought my business, when I handed him the keys to all the equipment and what I was selling, it just dawned on me he was walking out of there with a profitable business, and I had to start over. And I was like, I think he's the smarter guy here. He has a profitable business and he's just starting, and it's already making money.
Welcome back to the Teach Traffic podcast with myself, Ilana Wexler. This is a show where we reveal the best tips, tricks and tactics to increasing your website traffic and then converting that traffic into leads and sales. We also discuss what's working right now in the ever-changing world of web marketing so you can apply it to your business. Welcome back to another episode of Teach Traffic. I'm your host, Ilana Wexler, and today we're talking to a lady called Dana from homehealthtesting.com about how she goes about buying an existing online business rather than building one herself from scratch. And Dana and I talk in depth about the metrics that you need to look at before you take the plunge to buy a business. So be it the due diligence aspects, the two main criteria before she buys a business that are kind of like deal breakers for her, and really all the pitfalls and honestly anything you would really want to know when it comes to buying or acquiring an online business. Dana is really knowledgeable on this topic. She's done it 7 times before in the last 20 years or so. So she definitely knows her stuff, and we cover lots of really useful information. So we're going to make a summary of this episode available so you don't have to worry about writing down notes. I'm going to create a summary of all the nuggets of gold that we talk about in this episode in our show notes that you can access from teachtraffic.com. And let's get stuck in today's show. Welcome to today's episode, Dana.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really stoked to have you here. We met for the first time in Miami about 6 months ago at Sellers Summit. Unfortunately, I didn't catch your presentation. I think I'm going to definitely watch it in the recordings. But you're sort of known in the industry as somebody who acquires businesses, builds them up, and then possibly sells them or just adds them to your portfolio. For the benefit of our listeners, do you mind kind of touching on, I guess, how you fell into this and the process by which you now adopt this technique?
Sure. And I have enjoyed that. In your podcast, you always do ask people kind of their journey, how they got there. And I think that's so interesting in business because none of us end up doing what we thought we were going to do. At least most people don't, right?
Totally. I used to want to be a vet.
Interesting. Yeah. I was an accountant.
There you go. So, I find people's journeys absolutely fascinating.
So I did start out in accounting, and I did not like being in accounting. But what was interesting about it is I worked for the firm I worked in and, owned actually, was we did about 100 different small business accounting income statements a month and then tax returns every year. So I got this crash course in how business kind of worked from the inside before I ever had a lot of experience working in business, which was super interesting because I saw, this was pre-internet days. So these are convenience stores and donut shops and beauty shops, like all these really mom and pop small businesses, who was making money, who wasn't, who was good at it and who wasn't. And it just gave me this insight into how all these businesses operated so differently, and while some might look really successful on the outside, they might not be on the inside. So I had this really great foundation of accounting, but I actually did not like accounting and client work at all. So I left that field and then I started a business, and I didn't actually like that business that much either. So I sold it, and that was kind of the turning point for me. The day I sold it, I just had that a little bit of a light bulb moment. The guy that bought my business, when I handed him the keys to all the equipment and what I was selling, it just dawned on me he was walking out of there with a profitable business and I had to start over. And I was like, I think he's the smarter guy here. He has a profitable business and he's just starting and it's already making money. So I decided then, I was like, well, I'm going to try that. I'm going to buy a business. And so that was like 7 businesses ago and over 20 years ago and that's all I've done since then. I just finally, got the idea from selling a business, but then I realized I'm not a very good starter. It's not my skill set, really. And my skills are better used after the business is up and running. And so that's what I set out to do. And it's made business so much more fun. So that's and I just keep reiterating the same process. And I buy a business that succeeded kind of on the last wave of technology and it's profitable doing it that way. And then I will take it to where it needs to be today.
Interesting. It's funny you mentioned the insights that you gained when you were an accountant. I think, well, firstly, you would have seen the obvious disparity between revenue and profit
Right.
with a very clear lens. But you probably get the same insights that I have got having run an agency for 7 years in terms of offers that are working and certain industries or niches as Americans pronounce, still can't get used to that, the way different industries work and convert. And there's definitely, I've had some clients where I've taken them on having never entered that market before and I'll be like, wow, what is going on in this market? Like these people are rabid and they love everything that we offer them, etc., versus others where it's like complete crickets and you just hear nothing. So I think you would have seen similarities at what I've seen having run an agency as well. But
Right. And then you get that same insight when you're buying a business because all that data exists. Unlike starting a business, I'm like you, I love data, absolutely love it. And to buy a business, you already have years of data you can look at, which makes a total versus the startup where you have to create the whole concept and build the database of what is this business going to become. Where when you buy a business, I can look at every transaction for the last 5 years and come up with, hypothesis of how we're going to grow this business.
So before we kind of touch on the data aspects, and I definitely do, I'm glad we share an appreciation of data because the data definitely does tell a story. Let's just quickly touch on why you think somebody would sell such a business. And I guess, I can appreciate the benefits why you'd want to buy one versus starting one from scratch. But for our listeners, maybe they kind of haven't exhausted or thought about all the advantages
For
why you
buying?
would want to buy one. Yeah, because obviously you're paying a substantial price for it.
Right.
So that trade-off, I would imagine speed of entering a market is a big reason why you would buy one versus starting it from scratch.
Right.
But I guess if you think something's worthy of buying, why would someone then be willing to sell that business, do you think?
Well, partly because they're tired and they're done and they're bored. In all honesty, I think we all hit a place in our business where we're just bored with it. And for some people that might be 3 years in, and other people it might be 10 years in. And you've thought about it enough. The other obvious reason is someone is retiring, so that certainly happens. But I think a lot of small business owners finally just get tired of it. It's not, and there's a personality issue in there too. If you're someone who loves starting things, then growing it 5 years later isn't near as fun to you, that's where I'm going to find my fun. But if they're a starter, if that's their personality type, then the last thing they want to do is to be, chained to this business that is the same thing they've thought about. They're ready to explore something new. So I think there's a lot of personality type things that go into it. And then A lot of people just burn out throughout that startup stage. The first 2 to 3 years in a business are really hard. They're
Yes,
exhausting, right?
totally. It's
And
like,
they can be demoralizing. Like you don't make as much progress as you hoped, and you get to a point, and if you hit that, I'm tired of it, and I'm getting bored with it, and I haven't accomplished as much as I wanted with it. Sometimes they're like, okay, I'll just sell this one and I'll go do something else, and it will be better because they're just done thinking about it. So that's kind of I've seen. I mean, I've talked to so many sellers over the years, and a lot of it is just an emotional. It's not the state of the business. It's they're done
yeah.
mentally.
So let's say one decides that you're going to explore this option. Is it the kind of situation where what are the initial steps? Do you kind of look for businesses that are actively listed as being for sale, or would you think to approach a business?
I always look for active sales listings for the biggest reason because I actually want the owner to be ready to go,
Right.
in all honesty, because I want to take over, on closing day. I kind of, after we go through maybe a training process, I want to get them out of the way and take this business and run with it. So I don't really want to try to convince someone to sell their business, and there's enough good businesses for sale, although it takes time to find them. I just don't want to do the convincing, of somebody to sell.
Yeah, fair enough.
So there's plenty for sale. I usually go through brokers. I'm mostly because I want the seller to have already contacted a broker and they've already done the homework of getting it ready for sale.
Okay. And when you
So
say,
that is a faster process to me.
yeah, okay, that makes sense. So when you say getting it ready for sale, I'm assuming you mean the financials and all the data, etc., and all that.
Right.
Right. So let's sort of
Right.
touch on that, the data aspects. Are there any specific, or is there like one key thing that you're looking for that would deem a business really attractive to buy versus another one?
Well, I have two criteria that are kind of, um, they must be. One of them, it must be profitable. I will not buy a business that's not making money, even if it's turning a lot of revenue. If it's not making money, that's just not my thing. I want it to already be profitable. So that's one thing. And then I like them to be, I prefer 5 to 7 years old. I'll go lower now, maybe down to 3, but probably I wouldn't, I haven't considered one below really 5 years old. So those are two things that if they don't meet those two criteria, I'm going to move on.
What about on the profitable aspect? What about if there's a way that you can see that you can turn it around pretty easily to make it profitable? Let's say they're spending a fortune on traffic and it's just not optimized very well, and you think you could turn it around pretty quickly, or there's sort of some easy levers that you could move that, or is it just no, you just wouldn't do it?
I've never run into one that it was that easy.
Okay.
So I'm not going to say I wouldn't do it. I've seen plenty of mismanaged businesses, and I guess what I'm looking for is something that, despite how crappy it's being run, it's still profitable because I
Right.
find that more attractive. So I don't want to buy the worst business on the block. I want to buy a business that, despite how bad the current owner is treating it, it's still profitable, even if it's, not that profitable. But at this point in my career, I won't probably buy anything that's not doing at least 50,000 a year in profit in US dollars, because I also want it to capture my interest enough. So if it's really small, it's not gonna I'm not going to be as compelled to work on it. So I really prefer just something that it is profitable, because I think we all can fall into the trap of looking at a business and saying, "Oh, these are really easy things to change." And maybe they're not so easy. Maybe there is something hiding in there that's holding that back, something you don't know.
And
So
on
I kind of want some profits when I buy it.
Yeah, fair enough. And the minimum of 5 years, is that because you're sort of have there's time under their belt, probably gone through a couple of cyclical cycles if there were any. Is that sort of the reasoning
Yes.
behind that?
And because I want the data. So I want enough data that I can make some guesses and stabs at what's working and what's not working. So I'm looking, I want to look deep into that data and find out where's the opportunity in this business based on what has been working. So I don't necessarily want to go out and just radically change the business and go try to attack a new, demographic or a new product line or something like that. I'm going to actually dig really deep in the data and say, they have this core group of customers that are buying from them. So let's go get more customers like that because we must be succeeding right there somehow. So for me, I want as much data as possible, as much history as possible.
Okay. So let's sort of delve a bit deeper on the data that you do look at. So you mentioned the customer data. So is that sort of the profile of a customer, be it, a female between a certain age bracket that seems to love the products more than, let's say, a male in a different age bracket? Is that the kind of profiling data that you look at, or do you look at different data numbers?
Well, I have a love of B2B businesses, so my preference is to find a business that has some level of repeat customers.
Mm-hmm.
So with like my current business, Home Health Testing, which I bought, we sell drug tests. So we have a lot of businesses that purchase from us, regularly, whether it be monthly or quarterly.
For their
So
staff.
right. So then I'm looking at, what type of business is that? Where can we find more of them? How can we communicate more like them? So those are the kind of things that we're looking for, but like we're profiling, that demographic of a business. I don't work very much in consumer side stuff, so it's more on a business or a really strong niche so that, if we know that very specific people doing one thing buy this product, then some of that skews a little bit toward consumer, but mostly I'm looking for businesses
B2B, you said.
as customer. Yeah.
And why do you do that?
And I will buy, actually when I bought, you can tell by the domain name, Home Health Testing. This is a good example because Home Health Testing, the person who founded it, started it to sell to individuals, sell drug tests to individuals. And if you asked him, like when I found out about the business for sale and talked to him, I was like, why did you start it? And he gave me this very big reason of people deserve to have, their own health tests at home and privacy and all these things. But when I started looking through the data, he had all these businesses buying from him. And I asked him about it and he was like, well, that's not really why I started it. Well, it doesn't matter. That's not why you started it. You have these customers. But the whole site, everything, all the communication on the site was targeted toward individuals. But our most profitable customers were businesses. So then I'm going to take that, and obviously target more of those type of customers. But then I'm also going to start changing the website to talk to them, to meet their needs and to answer their questions versus the direction he had taken it. And I think that's what happens a lot when people start businesses, and why when you buy it, you can make really fast progress is somebody starts a business to do what they think is going to work in the marketplace. And a lot of small business owners actually never listen to the business because at some point, especially when you get as long as like 5 years after that business started, the business took a life of its own. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it is now its own entity that is attracting customers on its own because it's strong enough and it's been around long enough. But a lot of times that person who started it never acknowledged that the business became this own thing that does something different than the identity they wanted it to have. And when I see that happen, and I've almost all of my purchases, in all honesty, that has come out during due diligence. I have found out that the owner has no idea where the gold is in his business. And that's when I get super excited because I'm like, wow, all I have to do is change this website, talk to businesses, and reach out to more businesses, and we can triple the size of this thing really fast.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a common trap for really anything, like not just business owners, but anything that you're doing, that you become so invested in it. You
Yes.
look at it with a very narrow lens. And it is, when you get too close to something, and it's very hard to stand back and get a helicopter view and have a really good sense of the lay of the land to see actually the big picture of what's going on. And I find this when I audit ad accounts and Google Analytics. People don't actually kind of go in with a different eye and get a real sense of what's the 80-20 here. So
Right.
20%
Exactly.
of the businesses were actually probably generating 80% of the revenue, but he didn't kind of perhaps
Right.
take the time to get that helicopter view.
Right. And a lot of times when you are the person who started the business, you want to prove your idea right. So it's hard to say, hey, I'm going to start this business for individuals, and then you're selling to businesses, and that what really wasn't your idea. And I think a lot of people just won't let go of the idea that, and they want to be right, that this was the business they were starting.
Interesting.
So
So
there's
you,
great opportunity in that. There's just tremendous opportunity.
would you? So you mentioned briefly the doing the due diligence and the pitfalls that are often hidden in the data. Do you mind sort of touching on what are some of these pitfalls that people could look out for that would avoid them making some sort of, I guess, classic mistakes?
One of the biggest ones in buying an e-commerce site specifically is cost of goods sold.
Right.
And I don't know why it's so difficult for all of us to agree on really how we do cost of goods sold, but it really is probably the biggest. Like if somebody's giving you financial statements, how they did their cost of goods sold is like a crapshoot. You have no idea, and it is going to be up to you to figure out if that business really is turning that profit that they're stating. And cost of goods sold and inventory values can really be a tough thing in trying to prove it, depending on how large the business is. When it's smaller, it's a little bit easier. And then when I do due diligence, and because again I have this accounting background, which is great for during due diligence because you really want to kind of triangulate your data. So if they're giving you an income statement, then you want to see, well, does that agree with, maybe the revenue in the cart? And then does that agree with how much money was deposited in the bank? So you're trying to find three different sources and see how close you can get them.
What are some of the ways that people could misrepresent their cost of goods sold, though? I mean, surely that's just information that they've got from their suppliers. How would they be hiding the real figure?
They're not actually hiding it, and I will say most of the time, what you discover in due diligence is nothing was malicious.
Right.
It's ignorance, in all honesty, on somebody's part, sometime on their accountant's part. I've seen people, they don't do cost of goods sold, they just post everything that they purchased. I mean, this is actually really common. They don't even run an inventory account, and everything they purchase, they just put in cost of goods sold. And so they have these wildly, like a high month and a low month on profits, and then they don't back out inventory at the end of the year. I can't explain why it's so difficult for everybody, but it is one of the hardest things for there to be a consistency in how people do their books with cost of goods sold.
You would think that's the role of their accountant, is to create and follow a standard practice and create that industry, I guess, standard practice for it.
Right. But it doesn't for some reason. And a lot of people don't go to an accountant on a regular basis. They just go at the end of the year. So then, and do their taxes. So then you're trying to recreate this data in a way to find out how the business is functioning all year long. It can be tricky.
Yeah,
And if
interesting.
you're not comfortable with it, you really do need to get somebody on your team to help with that because it can change when you're talking about you're going to pay possibly a multiple of 3 times the profits of that business. If the profits are off, it's severely impacting the price you're going to pay.
Correct. So is that standard in the industry to pay a 3 times multiple?
That's what we're seeing right now. I mean, it's been as low as 2, but right now we're seeing it's averaging around 3, 2.5 to 3.5, depending. A lot goes into that, like the age of the business and the sector it's in, things like that. But right now, 3 is kind of common.
3 times annual profit.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
And then the other rookie mistake that I think is happens a lot is rushing to buy something. So if you decide, like say you listen to this podcast, and I think you've done others on buying a business, and you listen to them and you're like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start looking for a business and I'm going to buy one before the end of the year. Well, what if there's no good ones for sale or that are good for you by the end of the year? It's not something you rush into. It's because there's not always good businesses that are a good fit for you available. So I look all the time. I've looked solid for 20 years in all honesty, and I only buy businesses every 5 to 7 years. So
Wow.
there's not, I mean, I'm really picky, but it's hard to find the good ones. And it's not really always just because they're not there. You also want to make sure you're looking at something that you're going to bring value to. And that's part of the due diligence process for me. So no, I'm proving every number that the seller is telling me of what I'm buying. And at the same time, I'm looking for where is opportunity and where can I add value. And I've looked at some where I don't see any way for me to add value because there's not things that are in my skill set or that I feel like I'd want to spend time doing. So you can't just say just because it's profitable that if your goal is to grow it, which is always my goal. I mean, if you're just buying them for cash flow, then maybe you don't want to add value. But if you want to grow it, you really need to know where your skills going to plug into this business.
Yes, absolutely. Is there a minimum amount of website traffic that you look for certain businesses, or is it sort of
No,
irrelevant?
to me it's irrelevant because I'm looking at that profit level and where are those profits coming from. So if they're, because I could, if I set my minimum as traffic, then I might miss a really great opportunity. I had a purchase a couple years ago where the site got very, very little traffic, but it was still very profitable. It was the traffic it did get was incredible, and they were repeat customers. So it wasn't a traffic issue. It was profitable despite having no traffic.
I guess there would be a case for many high traffic businesses that are not that profitable as well.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So to me, traffic isn't the biggest. And actually, that same business that I purchased, they had no Google Analytics ever set up on the site, and
Wow.
no ads had ever been run.
That would make it hard then to get a real sense of what is going on online without Google or some sort of analytic software
Right.
installed. In that situation, would you request that they install Google Analytics and maybe have it run for a month before you actually purchase?
I didn't need to on that one because I had such a strong belief in the repeat customers that were there, and I could see easily on just some common keywords that the SEO was in line for it. And I knew it wasn't much traffic. I mean, that was evident, but it had enough other really great things going on that I could let that one slide.
Yeah. What about the issue of suppliers? So say you acquire a business and they've obviously got that business has got their relationship with certain suppliers. Is there any certainty that the new relationship that then you will have with their suppliers will continue?
I always, during due diligence, require that I'm allowed to speak to each supplier.
Right.
So I get the seller's permission that I'm going to call them, and I will ask how much the seller owes them, if anything, how, what their average purchasing was, even though I've already looked at all the invoices and make sure that, they're what I looked at from the seller's point of view agrees to what the vendor says. And then I actually just point blank ask them, will I still be able to buy from you?
I guess what do they say, like a gentleman's handshake of nothing is sort of signed on a dotted line, but there's sort of a verbal agreement that you can develop this new relationship with them.
Right.
Okay, cool. If you were starting again, or sort of, I guess, knowing what you know now, and you were starting, what advice would you give someone?
To start reading businesses for sale now. And actually, I would give that advice to even any entrepreneur. If you want to get MBA in small business, read businesses for sale. Like, get used to learning how people how other businesses operate, even if you're not interested in them. So to me, that I think is where the breadth of my knowledge has come from because I have read so many businesses for sale. I know so many weird things about small business just because I've followed businesses for sale. And I feel like that has been the best thing that I've done. And it has helped me understand like profit margins and things like that. What business types make incredibly more money than other business types and things like that. So it's been a great fun thing in my career to have always studied businesses for sale. And I think there's tons to learn from it. So even if you think you might be buying 2 years from now, just start subscribing to businesses for sale on Biz Buy Sell or whatever platform you want and start getting used to the language and how they're sold and how they're packaged.
Does where the business is located make a difference, do you find? So say, for
Uh,
example, you see a business listed in Europe that looks interesting and you're in America.
I think if you can figure out the logistics of it, if you are comfortable figuring that part out, I don't think it would matter. When I bought Home Health Testing, it was operating in the United States, but the owner was in Thailand and running it from there.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think as long as, it's going to always come down to like you have to have, even if it's something you've never done, when you learn about the business and the more you learn, you're like, wow, I had no idea this was even possible, this type of business. But you still have to have that understanding, good basic understanding of what's making this thing work. So if you are looking at a business in Europe, you should have a decent understanding of what are the complexities of that business based, from what you're used to seeing. So if things don't scare you off, I don't mind hard work. I like to work hard, and there are plenty of things I don't know when I buy a business, but I kind of want to have that like a confidence of I get this. I get what's going on here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that's typically outlined in a listing, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
And then in your conversations with the seller, sometimes you might not understand right at first, but when they explain it, you don't want to buy something that you just don't, you're clueless. And I think there's plenty of online businesses I'm clueless about how they operate. So there are things I could get in trouble in. So I try to just stick with that. I have to have a good understanding and maybe a inkling to why customers are buying from it. Because if I'm always in that position of going, I don't have any idea why people buy from this, then I don't know that I would know how to make it better.
One thing I haven't asked you yet is what do you find, or is there a typical profit margin of such a online business, or does it vary really wildly depending on what they're selling?
On net profit margin,
Or even gross profit margin?
it does vary on each business. I can tell you what my personal requirements are. I want a gross profit margin of more than 50%.
Wow.
In the business I'm buying, I want a net profit margin already of more than 10%, maybe pushing 20%, and then we're going to push that even further. So I'm going to increase the profit margins by when we grow it is my goal.
So, what are some of the ways that you would increase your gross profit margins? I guess,
We're
are there some easy ways?
We do, again, we dig deep in the data. We do an 80/20 analysis on which items are providing the most of our gross profits, and we focus only on those. So, an example, when we bought the drug testing site, I think at that time it had about 50 items on the site, and there was about 10 of them on a classic 80/20 that were providing 80% of the margins. And so instead of focusing on the whole catalog, we actually we went deeper and deeper into the data and picked the two out of those 10 that had the highest margin and had the opportunity for growth. So we just focused then on really blowing out our best efforts on two products instead of the whole catalog.
Right. And when you
So
say,
we really focus on where can we drive some margin in this business.
I understand that makes total sense. But when you say really focusing on just those products, focusing how, like driving Google ad traffic,
Yep.
running some kind of promotions, that kind of stuff?
Driving ad traffic, maybe cutting off if we don't have a big enough budget in our budget right then, we'll cut off ads to all the other products and
Yep.
really just put all our ads toward two products and get really good at those and write a ton of content, write really good content, really do videos on the products, like just put all our efforts for maybe a year into one or two products or one category on the website instead of doing everything.
Yep.
We just focus down on where can we make, and I think one of the reasons I like buying a business also is because I need pressure to work well. I'm a procrastinator and,
You don't sound
can,
like one. That's a
when I have,
compliment, by the way.
yeah, but if I don't have like something that's really driving me and pressuring me, so I set really, a big goal that I'm going to double the profits in a year when I buy a business, and I'm hell bent on doing it. So in order to do that, and I'm talking about the profits of the business, not doubling the top line. It's actually a
Yes.
lot easier to grow the top line, right? If
Yes.
you're not worried about if it's profitable or not, I could grow any top line, but I'm going to double the profits of this business. So I have to have a pretty concentrated way to get that done fast.
Yep.
So that's why we drill down and we're trying, in all honesty, on an e-commerce business to move the gross margin of the business up. So if I buy a business that's doing 50% gross margin, probably after we go through the data and make our decisions on where we're going to focus our time, by the end of that year, it'll probably be doing 55 or 60% in gross margin, which is all going to fall to the bottom line for
Yes.
us.
Yep.
And we do that by this concentrated effort where we're putting all of our best efforts on the products. And at the same time, I'm negotiating with the vendors and I'm letting them know that I'm going to triple the amount we're buying of this and I'm negotiating better pricing. So yeah, we're going to do everything we can do in marketing, and then on the behind the scenes, we're negotiating with our vendors, and even things like if we're buying more, we save a ton in shipping because we're buying in bigger, we might be buying by the pallet versus the carton and things like that.
Yep. So not only are you increasing your top line, you're reducing your COGS, cost of goods sold.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep. That makes total sense. From an ad point of view, you said driving traffic to these best sellers. What are your thoughts on what is an ideal, I guess, return on that ad spend? I find there's generally two different schools of thought, and some people feel that their ads should just break even so that, one time's return on their ad spend to build a customer base and a repeat customer base and build their business that way, versus others which I guess are perhaps a little bit less aggressive in their marketing strategy and need to get some kind of profit from their ads. Which camp do you fit into?
At this point, we're not in high growth mode with our companies, so I'm more on the profit side of our ads.
Right.
So we're kind of targeting the 2x to 3x return so that we are profitable on the ads.
Right.
But in the early stages, when I'm doing that concentrated effort, I would go for, I don't like to lose a terrible amount of money, but I do want the data to understand what's working and to find out if we have some unidentified audiences and demographics that we could be targeting. So I'm willing to spend more. In that first year or two when I take over a business, I'm willing to run our ads at break even or a little bit of a loss. But we have repeat customers, so it's easy to justify.
Of course. Yes. You said when you buy one, it's a 3 times multiple. So how quickly do you require? I guess there's no guarantees, but how quickly are you looking for the investment to repay itself?
Well, since I'm buying on a 3x multiple of what it's doing now, and my goal is to double or triple it in that first year and a half, I'm kind of wanting my money to be flowing back in under 2 years.
Right.
So, and if I hit my goal in growth, then in under 2 years the business has returned. But I've also worked in the business, so we've negated my time. But then at that point, after 2 years, then all of that's free and clear. My money is back in my pocket. And now we have a business. Let's say I bought one that was making 50,000. Now it's making 150,000 because I tripled it in profits. And I've put my original investment has already come back. So now I have a nice business that has a good cash flow per year.
Yes, definitely. And are you somebody who creates a portfolio of such businesses, or are you a flipper and you like to
I
flip?
do not flip. I keep them shockingly 10 years or more.
Interesting. There you
Yeah,
go.
so what happens, and the reason I do that is that first year when we hit all that growth, obviously my cash flow is, even though I'm that profitable, my cash flow is tight because I'm spending on ads and I'm having to buy a lot more inventory. So even though I got it to this 3x position, I'm not really going to start feeling really great cash flow until we bring back that growth just a little bit. And if I have really good results in the first year and I hit my triple of the profits, then I know I've still got some runway. So we'll stay in growth mode maybe another 2 years. So now I've owned it almost 5 years, but then I'll kind of pull back on the hard growth and we'll turn it into a cash flow machine.
Right.
And that's when it's lovely to keep them. It's really nice because you're efficient. I have a really good staff and everybody knows what they're doing, and it's not very stressful. So
That's good.
I enjoy that period of business where they make really consistent good money and we have great customers and great staff. So those are the hard ones to let go of.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess you've worked hard to get it to that point, so
Right.
why not reap in the benefits of it? Okay. Is there something which I have not asked you that you think is important to cover if you consider going down this avenue, or have we pretty much covered everything?
Yeah,
I did
I
have
think
a long list of questions, and I've crossed them all off as we've we've been going through them.
I think one thing I didn't mention in my journey was when I said that I sold one business and I decided I would buy my next business. I actually did not, when I sold that business, I did not make enough money to go out and buy another business. I only had a very small little amount of money that returned from the business I sold. So I kind of bootstrapped my way through buying businesses by taking partners in the first few years. So I found a business I wanted to buy, but I did not have enough money for it. But I find it really easy to find investors,
Interesting.
through my own network, because I'm not asking them to invest in a startup where they don't know they're going to make their money. I have an income statement. I have a business I'm going to buy that's making this much money, and I can make my payments to my investor out of the profits. And so I bootstrap my way through this process. Now I can buy my businesses on my own with my own cash. But when I started out, I had always a 50% or more investor. My first investor owned more of the business than I did, but they had money and I didn't. So it was fine. But then we sold it, and then I took that money. And then the next time I bought a business, I didn't have to take as much outside investment.
Right.
So then I got to the 50-50 level, and then I eventually bought them out, and now I'm on my own. But it sounds like, a lot of times people think, oh, I'll never be able to do that. I don't have any money. But it's really easy to convince an investor to buy into a profitable business. I mean, the money, you can see the profits.
And is the idea that a couple of years in you would buy that investor out, or they are happy to stay?
Either way, I've done it both ways. I've done, buyouts at a certain date and time where you say, this is when it's going to transition. I've had some lend me the money without taking equity, which is unusual. They just wanted to make the interest, but they trusted me. So it's easier. It's just much easier because they can see the cash flow. They can see that they're going to get their money back.
Yes, yes. Rather than some crazy idea that you,
Exactly.
you
Right.
truly believe will work.
Right. And that's really hard to get investment money in, but it's kind of a lot easier in this realm. So it's a good way to kind of bootstrap your way by using other people's money because you have proof that you can pay them back.
Yes. Well, this has been fascinating for me, and I hope for our listeners as well. I'm mindful of the time. I know it is your night time, and I know how I am at night time, so I don't want to take up any more of your time. So, Dana, before we sign off, where can people find out more information about you and all the stuff that you do?
I write semi-annually on a blog called 44ideas.net. So I'm not a big blogger, or I'm occasionally on someone else's podcast like yours, and my blog, if you ever just wanted to contact me, is 44ideas.net.
And that's the number 44, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Uh-huh. Correct.
Cool. Alrighty. We'll make that a wrap. Thank you so much for taking time out of your evening, especially.
Thank you.
And the pleasure's been mine. And I learnt heaps, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. So thank you again.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to the Teach Traffic podcast. For more information on each of these episodes and handy PDFs that you can download, head on over to teachtraffic.com.